Ladies and gentlemen, hello, or should I say bonjour, because this is so cheesy. This is such a cheesy intro. But welcome to another episode of Pioneers Talks. I'm really excited. I mean, I'm always excited, but I'm super excited because on the other end is Flore. Hello. All the way from Marseille.
Hi.
Hello. So we used to work together in a company called Nation Builder. I was a coward and I left many years ago, and now I do the very lucrative job of science. But Flore is incredible, and she's still there, and she's a complete beacon of Nation Builder as a senior product marketing manager. Yes.
Yes.
And also, she is the co-founder and co-president of Avote, which she's going to tell us more about as well. But for me, this is great because we get to catch up after many years and see where the world of digital organizing has gotten. So, Flore, welcome.
Thank you. Great to see you.
It's great to see you as well. Flore, maybe I'll start with a really boring question, but like I know the context, but the people watching this might not. What do you do, and how did you get to Nation Builder, and what does Nation Builder do? Tell us about it.
So I'm a product marketing manager at Nation Builder, and Nation Builder is a company that provides software for leaders. And so there are, many types of leaders in life. So the product is meant for organizations like political campaigns or political parties, for advocacy organizations, for nonprofits, for even brands. Whenever they need to manage their communities, organize, and actually produce change, they can use Nation Builder. And so, it has multiple pillars. You have a website, you have some communication tools, you have fundraising tools, and a database, which allows you to actually keep track of everyone and making sure that you are engaging them in a meaningful way. So that's, in a nutshell, Nation Builder. I've also co-founded an organization, which is a nonprofit in France. And because there's a big problem in France right now. There are many problems. One of the problems that we have is that the youth is not voting anymore. And so we have a lot of young people who are not actually taking the power that they have to actually cast their ballot. And so the goal of this organization is really to try to shift that trend and get people back to voting. And so we're doing that in many different ways. We're raising awareness about elections. We're trying to do advocacy so that it's easier for the youth to get registered to vote. And we're also doing some advocacy and community organizing. Yeah. So yeah, in a nutshell, and how I came about is essentially nothing to do with this, basically because I was studying agricultural sciences, and I was very passionate about the environment and started to become an activist. And that's where it kind of shifted, because I volunteered with many organizations and got hired. And then at some point I discovered community organizing, and I was like, oh my God, this is really amazing. This is just a way to formalize all of the things that you need to do when you need to actually organize people. And so, I leaned into it, went to the US to work as a volunteer on the Bernie Sanders campaign, then came back, did a few campaigns and started working at Nation Builder. So yeah.
It's incredible. You've opened up so many interesting topics, with the youth not voting, for example. It's one of the things I'm scientifically interested in, how democracy and the voting system works, in the first place. But I'll get to that. But what I love about you, well, the fact that you're amazing in general, and I miss you. But also when you came to Nation Builder and we were in the London office together, we were kind of on the opposite ends of the political spectrum, kind of seemingly. I have, by the way, a small update since then, completely abandoned politics. Okay. So I'm away from politics. I just do science. But what was really interesting, that actually the core principles of things like decentralization, autonomy, even through agriculture and things like that, we were completely one-on-one on. And it was actually meeting you was the first time where I started thinking, okay, if you take the toxicity of political parties away from this, what are the big questions that we're actually dealing with? And community organizing in terms of Nation Builder was really great in that regard. It's basically like digitalizing community and kind of finding out the relationships between people. And that was great. And one of the things that we worked together on, you mentioned France, was the French presidential elections. I remember Jean-Luc Mélenchon and Nathalie Cusco-Morizet, like all these things.
Absolutely.
But Emmanuel Macron was one of the candidates. Could you give us like an example maybe of did he still work with Nation Builder like after that? Like how did the French politics of that develop? Because it was a big kind of part of Nation Builder when we were there together. So how has that developed?
Yeah, it's been really interesting because it was really as I got started at Nation Builder that I was able to like work with like all of the presidential candidates almost and like worked on incredible projects of like massive scale where, you know, like Macron used the software and then won his election and then he had to like get a majority in parliament. So like he set up a massive network to like actually provide infrastructure to all of the candidates of the party. And, you know, it was really an incredible scale. And like, I was so grateful to be a part of that. I think it's, you know, since then, French politics has constantly evolved in that direction of, as in digitalization of campaigns and like professionalization also of practices. And I think, you know, we're not going back. Like it's really great to see that industry actually get set up because it means that campaigns are more performant, but also that they are safer in a way, you know, because GDPR and like all of these things that we need to be extremely careful about when we're dealing with like personal data. And so it means that actually like people are doing the work to like actually do things right and make sure that they're respecting the consent and like engaging people in a meaningful way and like building trust. So I think, yes, it's kept on like developing and it's something that's like for the best, like really ingrained in practices now.
Yeah, you kind of opened up another kind of Pandora's box, which is Nation Builder product as a whole, right? I remember like when we were working there in like 2015, 2016, GDPR was coming in and, you know, you mentioned consent and it's scary how much data we leave behind. And, you know, Cambridge Analytica was basically just a clever way of looking at data. Like they didn't have good or better tech. They just like had better Excel spreadsheets and were able to get like good knowledge about people without the people necessarily realizing that that's the data that they're leaving behind. Technology has like really gone like, you know, developed like during the last few years. We've got the rise of artificial intelligence. Things like blockchain is being discussed on a European level, the de-anonymization. How has that changed in like the world of politics? So like how's Nation Builder dealing with that as a product basically with all these changes?
That's a good question. So, you know, we've had to like set up some safeguards to like make sure that we're doing things right. So as you mentioned, the GDPR was a big part of it. And but like what it comes down to is we are software that is like basically the infrastructure.
Yeah.
So there is kind of a base that, you know, political parties need or campaigns or whatever. And so there are like kind of the blocks that I mentioned, you know, making sure you have a good database that is secure, that, you know, allows people to like delete all of the information you have on them if they want. And like, you know, leave no trace basically. Yeah. And so I think this is like really key in that regard. And then when it comes to like other types of technology, like other innovations, I think we're really still at the beginning of the discussion on that. You know, some organizations are starting to raise money in cryptocurrencies. Yeah. And it's really interesting because it opens them up to new types of communities, like maybe younger people who are not necessarily used to donate in the same way as their like longtime donors. And it's like really super tight communities that are, if they are engaged, they can like really provide a lot of value. So I think, you know, there's a lot of new things coming up in terms of like what it means to for our product. There's like, we are still infrastructure and we're like kind of staying on that level. Yeah. And, you know, maybe in a few years I'll say things differently, but for now, this is really like we're providing the base so that you can really build meaningful connections with people and like develop leaders. And so the basic tool set that you need hasn't changed that much. Like basically the way I like to think about it is nation builder is like a second brain, because when you're doing like community organizing, what's really important is knowing the people that you're interacting with, like making sure that, you know, you don't forget that you had a conversation about staying with them. And so like keeping track of all of this. If you're doing it at a small scale, it's like completely fine and like super easy. But once you're trying to like really grow a movement and like try to make meaningful change, like then you need to like rely on technology to actually make that possible. And so this is really the infrastructure that Nation Builder is here for.
Yeah. So this is funny. You know, we're recording this over Microsoft Teams, and they were saying, an hour we have, because we have the unpaid version, obviously, because we've got no money. But they said, an hour should be enough. I was like, no way. You don't know Flore. Because you've opened up so many interesting topics. Again, one of them is it's basically like evolutionary anthropology, right? Because when you have, so for example, Robin Dunbar, who's like my go-to scientist in this regard, when he talks about like maintaining and holding in your head like all the social connections that you can have, and you can have 200, 250, like we're very limited. But then exactly when you need to scale, and suddenly you've got institutions or nation states that have got like 50 million people in them, like how do you scale that? Exactly. And it's like the problem with the data. So we have a lot of data around us, but the problem is like what to do with that data, like having like smart data and not big data. And this is really fascinating to me, and actually something I'm really thinking about in terms of like our research as well. In science, like this scientists like reinventing the wheel in parallel to each other, not necessarily like talking, raising money for science is a whole other thing, because grants are not always the way forward. And this kind of like community decentralization and digital organization is a really fascinating thing. And I wanted to ask you, back in the day, like, when we, for example, worked, because Nation Builder is so agnostic and non-partisan, we did work with people like Donald Trump, and there was like a big reaction from the community regarding that, although I think that it's actually very in line with Nation Builder values, and I think that's fair play. But people kind of think about digital organizing in terms of politics. You mentioned like other use cases. What else does Nation Builder do? Like what else can it be used for? Because the principles are so cool.
Yeah, there are so many things, and we're mostly known for political use cases, but there are plenty others. So for example, I don't know, the thing that I really like about how Nation Builder works is that you can have people from like all scales. And so, we have small organizations, for example, in Switzerland, like advocating for the use of bicycles. Okay. And so they are, because it's like a super safe means of transportation, then it's ecological and like good for health. And so they are like basically advocating for the development of bicycles in the city, organizing a lot of events, like creating their whole community and like making that momentum kind of grow. And so we have things like that, like really local advocacy organizations. We have organizations that work with refugees in the US, for example. Like we have this organization called We Welcome. They are like a network of Christians who are like trying to move the needle and like welcoming refugees. And so they're doing this at, the national scale. We have companies that are doing advocacy as well. So for example, I don't know if you know the company Wise. They were previously TransferWise. Oh yeah. And so they're doing advocacy to, make it more transparent, the fees you have to pay when you are making transfers. Or, like in the European Union, like an organization cannot like refuse to take your IBAN if you are in a foreign country, because that's like the European rule. So they are like creating these advocacy campaigns so that like people are actually, safeguarded and like they can actually move the needle on this. So, it's very broad, the kind of things that we work on. There's another example, like in the very kind of equality progressive spaces. We had a campaign in Switzerland advocating for marriage for all, and so because there was a a referendum in Switzerland. They vote a lot on like specific issues, and so there was this campaign that was run on Nation Builder, and they actually won the campaign because they were able to like really like build their community and like make a lot of noise, give out a lot of flags, and like really raise this as an issue at the time. And so yeah, it's like a very wide spectrum of like local, national, even like international campaigns. We have another organization which is the international. Let me try to remember that name. International campaign to abolish nuclear weapons.
Oh, okay.
And they worked on this treaty with the UN that they had to like get ratified by 50 different countries. And so they like mobilized their communities in each of the countries to like actually make this work. And so, you know, there's, yeah, just to give you a sense of like the different scales that projects on, it's really, really cool and exciting.
It's very cool. I actually remember when I was leaving, maybe like the year after, either it was the Knights Templar or someone like that basically contacted Nation Builder. They're like, oh, we need to like manage our membership database. And that was really cool. So yeah, I think what connects all humans, because we are fundamentally social animals, is the need to organize and the need to build communities. But what you mentioned Switzerland. And even within Europe, we've got such a different kind of cultural approaches to how society should be organized. You know, direct democracy. Some people don't believe in democracy at all, and that doesn't necessarily mean being authoritarian. But like it's, you know, in the kind of ancient Greek sense, democracy wasn't really democratic at all. It was basically social eugenics. And that's something I wanted to ask as a follow-up question: is the kind of like the anthropology of community, like whether, because I remember, you know, when we were in London, the kind of customers that we approached in Europe had very different concerns about data, very different concerns about the product. They approached community building in a different way, you know, based on, for example, traumas from the Second World War. Like bookkeeping and archiving people's data, like, you know, was a completely different approach to America. Do you still see that? Like, for example, even in, you know, with the rise of the fear of China and the way that they process data, do you see that kind of coming up in conversation, like the different ways in which people react to Nation Builder, for example, regarding their culture?
Yeah, I think so, always. And it's, I want to say it's the case almost in like any country we start working in, because, yeah, and it's, well, from my perspective, especially in Europe, where there's so much diversity, there's almost always going to be a thing that is different, and we have to adapt and like, you know, try to explain and like find an understanding with the customer and like, you know, make some changes sometimes, because yeah, it's just, countries operate differently and cultures are really, really different. But that's the beauty of it is, I think, in like at least most democracies that we work in, the dialogue is similar. You know, you need leaders that are going to take on projects and like organize people around them to like make a change. And so it can take like many different forms, and, you know, it can be for a referendum, it can be for like a local vote, it can be for just like bringing a topic to the agenda. Mm-hmm. In any case, I think the mechanics are very similar, and so that's why, you know, we're able to work in so many different areas. Yeah,
I remember when I came for the training with one of our Albanian clients. This was years ago, right? And for example, their approach to data collection was, how to put it mildly, very different to that, like, you know, respecting citizens' data and stuff. It was really interesting. And one of the things that always culturally interested me is that in a lot of like languages you don't even have the word for leader. You know, that the kind of Western culture is very kind of like you have the leader and like the whole society is structured around that. But in Czech, like the name for leader is basically Führer, right? So we can't exactly like use that. So yeah, the anthropology of kind of community building in this regard is really interesting. And I wanted to. Do you know what
the word for leader is in French?
No, I should, but I don't.
It's very hard. Listen, it's leader.
Leader. Bah oui.
Yeah, see, there's like not even a word in France. And And people are actually not really fond of this word either. I don't know, it's not the same history as the Flore thing, but yeah, it's like it has a very bad connotation.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Because it's true that in Czech, it's almost seen as like a little bit like arrogant, like you want to like lead the people. I think in that sense, we've got much more of like a collectivist mindset. And that's one of the things that like absolutely fascinates me, like the different approaches to like social structure. But I will leave that to the end of the podcast because I've got some ideas that I want to discuss with you in front of you guys, of course. But before I do that, what do you do in terms of like the product marketing? Like what is your, and sorry, this is a boring question, but like your day to day, like what is the meat of what you do? I'm really keen to know like how you've developed in Nation Builder as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I also have to say that it's a very recent role that I've taken on. So nice. I'm still, learning and discovering it. But essentially, the product marketing role is to make sure, our product team is developing super cool features and like always trying to be at the top to like allow customers to do their work like more easily or better. And so they're doing great work. And then you have teams that are customer facing. You have the sales team, you have the enterprise management team who are helping customers on the day-to-day. You have the support team. And so all of these teams are like really on the ground and seeing, the work of the customers and helping them do that. And so I'm kind of like the connecting glue between the product and the customer facing teams, because essentially when the product team has finished developing or in the process, they're gonna need to like share the new products with the rest of the company. And so I'm here to like really ensure that the communication happens smoothly and that everybody understands the value proposition of the new feature. So where for example, we are making some changes. We created a portal for donors to be able to log in and see their donations and be able to change their recurring donations. So I'm giving like 10 euros a month to an organization. I'm able to log in and actually change this. So it creates more transparency, more trust. And so my role there is to like actually make sure that everybody at the company and, outside the customers understand what it is and why why everybody needs to use the feature. So it means, creating documents, internal training, launch communications, so that when we are actually shipping the feature, like everybody's able to understand what's going on and why it's important.
Yeah, because I guess because there's so much sensitive data, like both in regards to like the individuals, but also like the financial data, reacting to those feature changes, like especially like when people don't understand them, is really crucial, and that's an awesome role. Congratulations! That like it fits you so well because you're such a good educator as well. What would you say is the kind of like biggest maybe like milestones that Nation Builder has gone like through changes, like through metamorphosis in like the last few years, although like the principle is still very much the same, that you've basically got, if I remember correctly, the people, like so like the CRM, the email and the communication, then the website, and then the finances. Is that still like the same kind of like skeleton? And if so, what are like the new bits that we can be excited about?
The skeleton is still the same, but there have been like a lot of improvements to like actually make it more performant and like more relevant to today's usage. So for example, we've created something really cool, which is automations. So you're able to now like create a series of automated messages, emails in particular. So how someone signs up on your website because they want to get involved as a volunteer. Historically, you had the possibility to send them an automatic email to say, hey, welcome, this is great that you're joining us. Here is all of the cool stuff we're doing. Now, with this feature, people are actually able to like create a proper like onboarding series without like sending it manually. So like you can like set up the infrastructure so that it really allows you to scale and you don't have to like constantly be trying to think like, oh, okay, I need to send an email to that cohort and like do this on a regular basis to So this is like really changing the game in that regard. Other stuff, so I mentioned the supporter portal, which is so really about transparency for donors. Something that we are working on right now is an email editor with drag and drop content block.
Nice.
Yes. So this was a really highly requested feature from customers. And so, yeah, it's really great because you don't have to know how to code to like create a really nice looking email. You can like, really compose it in a really seamless way. So yeah, there's plenty of small things also, in terms of like performance improvement, in terms of really usability, like making sure that the design patterns are like the same everywhere. There's a lot of like background work that really contributes to like making the software more usable, and yeah.
That's awesome. Oh, the drag and drop feature. I remember this very vividly. I was sitting in the WeWork office in Liverpool Street. And I think it was before you joined. And we were sending like a newsletter to all of the people that were like Europe-based customers. And it was like 1,700 people. And, Tony, she was like, design an email. I was like, of course, I'm a technologist. So I did this email, which is like big color blocks, like, at the top, like nation builder, like big logo, below it, like nation builder. And I was like, hacha, and I clicked send. And then she was like, what the hell is this? It's like the ugliest newsletter I've ever seen in my life. So yeah, I would welcome the drag and drop feature. No, it's. I really wanted to ask. I know that we've kind of gone away from the politics a little bit, but I want to return back to it for a moment, because I've been, like following very closely, especially like British politics. I like keep like refreshing the feeds every day, and wow, yeah, it's. There's a lot of meat there. I can't really believe what's going on, like with Liz Truss, or like the whole kind of. There's so much kind of aversion from the general public, people who used to be ardent conservative supporters, and everything's like breaking apart. Like the trust is completely gone, I think, on all sides. And that kind of like leads me to like a personal academic thesis that I'm working on, is that I'm not sure whether nation states can survive like in their current format. And that doesn't necessarily mean anything wrong. I think we'll fundamentally get to more regional autonomy, decentralization, breaking apart of the nations that are still like, pretty modern. But do you feel like, or do you see like a changing behavior within the political parties and their customers or their voters? Like, is the dynamic between them changing and shifting? I'm just curious if you've got some either examples or some like personal, because you have your NGO as well. So like whether you see any mechanisms, social mechanisms that might be changing.
Yeah, so I think, I view this high level, especially in France, but I think it's also true in other countries in Europe and in the world. The membership of parties is declining. Like less and less people are registered members of a political party. Mm-hmm. And I think it says a lot in terms of like parties being able to connect with citizens. I think, of course, there are still people who are highly engaged with political parties and are members and are active and like are doing things. But it just seems like there is more and more of a gap between those who are like highly engaged and the rest of society who doesn't generally trust political parties and like is kind of like looking from afar. And I mean, I kind of create the connection between this and the rising abstention in France, because like less and less people are voting, and especially in the youth. And it doesn't mean that people are not engaged in political conversations. It just means that they are doing it differently. Yeah. They are protesting a lot. Like if you look right now, like people are on the streets every week and they just want stuff. But yeah, it's just the participation has kind of changed in its form, and the problem is right now the way nations are governed is you have to vote to elect people, and that's how the government gets created and like evolved. So there's like kind of a discrepancy, and I agree with you that down the line there's probably something to think about how we better like realign all of these things, because there seems to be like for sure a big disconnect between like the real people and the politicians. Yeah. I was reading a research article where basically it was talking about protests in the world, and the number of protests is like really rising. It's been rising constantly since like 20 years. And the main like problem that people are protesting against is democracy. You know, they are. This is really the main concern, and the first kind of demand or like problem is that there is a problem of representation. People who are elected, politicians in general. So I think this is really telling, like, because it was a study on like a lot of different countries, I think there is definitely something that is shifting and has to shift.
Yeah. Wow. That is fascinating research. And you're right in the sense that, you know, on one hand, like, what are the metrics of engagement, right? On one hand, you have kind of people not voting or people like not being members. But on the other hand, they're more passionate about politics than ever before. And they're actually really actively politically engaged, but just not in the way that traditionally would be, you know, measured as engagement. And it's interesting because, like, you know, in the David Cameron era and like, you know, Barack Obama, and it was like nice, like it was a very clean campaigning. You know, you pay for the software, then you deliver it, someone does your marketing, then it ends, then you say goodbye. And now it's just a mess. Like, at least like from like the outsider's perspective, like parties are being torn apart from within. People are like, you see people who traditionally were like on the right that are now on the left, and like everything's kind of like mixing, and it's really fascinating in that regard. And like what's going on in France, for example, you know, it's so intense. It's so intense. And I'm curious whether like how COVID has might have changed that, because everyone says, you know, COVID changed everything. It brought everything into the online. For me, it was the power of like the decentralized communities during COVID that, you know, and the war in Ukraine, where you suddenly are able to mobilize people very quickly to actually solve the problem at hand. Like, how did you guys register this on your end? Like, was it a big change for you as well? Like, were there any new maybe trends in organizing that's like suddenly popped up?
I think it's definitely shifted things for sure. You know, well, it's forced people to just like organize online because there was no other choice.
Yeah.
And I think it's like very certainly helped like technology to also like progress, like people to get more digital savvy. If you like, just a random fact, but if you look at like grandparents before COVID and after COVID, like there's a lot more of them who know how to use WhatsApp. But you know, WhatsApp has been really instrumental during COVID as a means of like organizing, because there were a lot of like local mutual aid groups that got developed on WhatsApp, and like and it was already a tool that organizers used to use, but I think it's like become even more widely spread like across all types of organizations. So there are definitely, you know, like tools that have been like progressing during that time. In terms of like the number of people who are active, I think I was reading a study on this recently. The like volunteers from nonprofits have actually like now gone back to a level of like offline volunteering that is like similar to like pre-COVID times, but it's just happening now. So it's been like really a really long period during which like people have not like actually come out of their home and homes and like actually be active. Yeah, I think it's like transformed organizations for sure, because like the ones who were like really assuring like emergency services, of course they were still on the ground, but all of the other ones, they had to like basically find another way to like continue doing their activities online, like in different ways.
Yeah, and it kind of like leads me onto the next question, which is, you know, one of the things that has really risen in the last like, you know, few years is artificial intelligence. Although, you know, it's one of the things that has really frustrated me in the last 3 years, that it's such a helpful tool. It's basically like statistics on steroids, but people are scared of it, you know, because, and you mentioned a really good point of digital literacy, that people, I think, are starting to be aware of like where their data goes. they're starting to realize that Facebook isn't listening to you because it doesn't need to, because you're leaving behind so much data. They're starting to think about like what politicians or like advocacy groups or whoever it might be is doing with the data that they provide. And there's kind of like a shifting mindset, but still, like, because these phenomena like blockchain or cryptocurrencies or AI has kind of risen so quickly, I think the kind of average person has, you know, trouble keeping up. And it's one of the great things of online organizing as well, is that you kind of teach people how to behave in the online world and how to organize themselves. I'm just curious whether these phenomena, whether it's the AI or blockchain, especially in Europe, where the European Parliament is regulating it a fair amount and like looking into like how to handle these technologies, whether it has affected online organizing. I mean, you mentioned like that people are accepting, you know, payments in crypto, for example, but you know, just the thought behind blockchain, which is basically like a decentralized like web, is fantastic. So how do you see that, like whether in Nation Builder or just like as someone who's a pro in the area? What's your opinion?
In terms of like the area of activism and like organizing, I'm not seeing AI like do a massive, like create massive changes yet, but I suspect it will happen soon. I'm seeing that, you know, some people are looking into what it means to use AI, for example, to if you're running an advocacy campaign and you want to contact representatives. So if you have I want to write an email to my legislator. If I write up an email and I'm a human, is it going to perform better than if I am if I am ChatGPT, if I send it from ChatGPT? So, you know, there are tests that are run like this. And so it shows that basically sometimes there are like big mistakes that are made by the AI. And so it's actually like super visible that it hasn't been written by a human. But most of the time it's actually pretty okay and like pretty cool. In the US, the Democratic Party has like tested ChatGPT. I think it's ChatGPT, some kind of AI on their fundraising emails, and they perform better when they are created by AI than like actual humans. So, you know, at least in terms of like content creation, I see that there is a lot of stuff that could really be helpful. In terms of like other areas, I haven't seen too much yet, but I suspect, you know, like I just feel like we are like kind of at the top of the wave where like everybody's talking about it, everybody's trying to use it, and so I just feel like some things are going to develop in the next few months for sure.
Yeah, it's true. There's so much hype about it, and it's basically, yeah, content creation is awesome. But like the fear around it and the like misunderstandings around it is really curious. What is interesting, however, is like the effect that has on, for example, like handling data. You know, like the de-anonymization of the peer-to-peer transactions, for example, is really interesting in the sense that like the state, and we're going back like to the idea of democracy and state building, is that you have a very schizophrenic relationship with, you know, the right to be forgotten, but, you know, you need to know stuff about your citizens. And it's this really weird thing that suddenly technology is giving us this possibility to live in like a parallel social organization, but at the same time, like, you know, you're still a citizen of your country and there's not much that you can do with about that. So how does that, for example, work with Nation Builder in terms of like the right to be forgotten or the like data protection? Is that something that's a big deal increasingly maybe for like your European customers?
Yeah, of course. I mean, increasingly, I don't know, because I mean, AI is, I don't think AI has even like come to play in that sort of area yet. But it has been like really important, right to be forgotten and data protection since the time the GDPR came into effect. And it's you know, we've like constantly been trying to improve like all of our tools to like help people enforce these principles, because not only is it like super important and like crucial for people to like have their rights guaranteed, but it's also like actually really great for an organization to like practice that, because it creates a lot of trust. And, you know, if I know that I am like on the website of a political party or like a nonprofit that really puts a lot of care into how they handle my data, you know, like and analytics data, like even on their website, you know, you can tell whether like they've put a lot of thought into like how they manage that. filling out a form to give out my my email address. I'm like so much more likely to do this if I know that they are going to be like really good about how they handle my data. So not only is it like really something we need to do because it's the law, but it actually like really allows like organizations to create trust.
Yes, yeah, and I think that trust is so important because, like, just to I'll give you an example from our neck of the woods. Is that after COVID, the Slovakian Ministry of Healthcare basically just like had like the data of like 400,000 citizens, like their COVID diagnoses, like addresses, phone numbers, names, everything, and it was basically like completely unchecked, just like lying somewhere. And a guy I know who's an ethical hacker was like, guys, maybe like this isn't quite okay. And imagine if like a black hat hacker had gotten to this, and they're like, yeah, that's fine. So it's like the cowboy approaches like to data is still like something that like doesn't cease to amaze me. Flore, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our little rendezvous. But what I wanted to kind of like end with is that you know, since leaving Nation Builder, like the idea of Nation Builder and, you know, Jim Gilliam's kind of like the internet is my religion vibe never really left me. You know, is that it's not, I don't want this to sound like I'm doing like just, you know, PR for Nation Builder just because I used to work there, but like the academic principles that underlie kind of like online organizing and community building, it's so interesting because it's so fundamentally human. What are you most excited about, or like where the direction of maybe, or the potential of community organizing that like you want to see happen? Like what's in store for Flore at Nation Builder and outside? Like what are you excited about?
Oh, I'm excited about so many things.
Yeah.
So, you know how I told you about our automation feature that really allows you to, as an organizer, like create your system and like basically do less like manual work and like focus more on the relationships. I think this is really the main, like the key basically of like where the future of organizing is. Like if we are able to safely create technology that will allow organizers to have less like annoying and manual work and like focus on like giving their whole brain space to like the relationships, I think this is like the way to go. Essentially.
Nice. And I couldn't have like wished for it. We didn't script this. She's just that good. That's like the best ending because what you know, like for the last few years I've been like with mixed success. I'm trying to basically like explain and demystify artificial intelligence for people. And like the number one kind of fear that you get from the general public is like, oh, it's going to take my job, or like what am I going to do with that free time? And what really annoys me is that in the tech world, like often like relationships are seen as like the soft bullshit that you don't need. And actually like that's what humans are good at. Like humans are not good at admin. Like I don't want to do admin. Exactly. I hate admin. And like so like and showing that through product, like showing that through the tech that you automate something, which means that you have more time to be human and focus on the human stuff. I think that's incredible. And it's great because I remember the pathway feature when like you know manually had to move people along, and the fact that this is going to be automated is just like that's awesome. Exactly. Awesome. Flore, you have been amazing. I cannot believe how quickly time has flown, and you're a mom now, and like you're living in Marseille, and you're just doing brilliant stuff. I'm really proud of you, and I hope that I need to have Nation Builder for my research group because it's getting to that stage where it's becoming like untenable. So that we can manage relationships with people and stuff. Nation Builder is exactly what I need, and I just hope that you come to Prague sometime, and I will buy you many beers, and I'll give you a big hug. That. Awesome. Thank you so much. Au revoir. Send my love to Sylvain and the baby. See you soon. Thank you. And yes. And ladies and gentlemen, you just witnessed a re-meeting of two friends who used to work together, and we never left each other's minds. Yay! Okay. All right.
So good to see you.
Bisous. Thank you so much. You've been great. Thank you. Au revoir. Bye. And I will see you with another episode of Pioneers Talks very soon. Thank you so much. And, you know, give us all that like, subscribe, everything, because I mean, you know, it's just the best content out there, obviously. So please do that. And thank you very much for watching. Bye.